Why I have Mexican residency. So, as I sit in May of 2024, I have had Mexican residency for over 2 years. In the winter of 21-22, I went in December of 2021 to San Francisco from my home further north in California, and I went to San Francisco to initiate the residency process. I then, after I completed that, I had to go to Mexico in order to complete the process. It's a two-part process. You do the first part at a Mexican embassy in the States, and then you do the second part on site with immigration officials in Mexico. And by the end of January 2022, I had temporary Mexican residency. Um, in the next year, in 2023, I renewed my Mexican residency, and at that time, I renewed it for 3 years. So essentially, from 2023 for this past year and the next 2 years, I don't have to do anything. I'm sitting on a temporary residency. I can be in Mexico as many or as few days as I want. I can actually be there 0 days if I choose to, and I can still maintain my Mexican residency. Or I could be there full time, constantly, year after year. And that would be within the boundaries of having a residency visa. In 2026, in 2 years, I will need to return to Mexico, most likely in January, to get the timing of the visa. And I will convert my temporary visa into a permanent visa, permanent residency. So I will have permanent residency as of 2026. And so now the question is, like, why did I do this? Like, why did I go through the hassle, the expense? The expense wasn't that much. I think to date, I figured I may be under $1,000 or around $1,000 for what it cost, just ballparking it. And in terms of, the time, I mean, if you add in my hotel bills in San Francisco, because I actually had to go twice because they denied me the first time I went to the Mexican embassy, and then I had to come back 2 weeks later and I had to stay in a hotel again. So yeah, I'm probably significantly north of 1,000 when you really look at all of the ins and outs of it. But it's definitely under $2,000. And what does that get me? Like, I'm on track to have permanent Mexican residency. Like, you might be like, well, what for? Like, are you going to live there, or you're not living there? Like, right now I'm sitting in my office in California in the United States. So, but this Mexican residency has a purpose. And that is that it's to me, it's an emergency plan. What this means is that depending on national or global or local events, regional, whatever happens in the world, I have another jurisdiction in on planet Earth other than the United States that I can go to. If anything goes down in the world, say I mean, we can't even imagine. I mean, 5 years ago, could you imagine that the pandemic would have happened? You would be like, that's crazy, lockdowns, etc. That's never going to happen, right? And well, it happened. Okay, so say in the 1990s, if somebody said to you, I think terrorists are going to bomb, are going to fly into the World Trade Center, you'd be like, come on, what are you smoking? So, things can happen that can dramatically change global, national events. And we don't even know what could come down. And I'm not talking about some, weird paranoid conspiracy about what could happen in the world, although, that stuff can happen too, right? But I'm not even talking about it. I mean, I'm talking about real world events. I mean, if you look at what happened in the pandemic, if you were Australian and you were outside of the country, you could not get back into your country. You are a national of Australia. You were born and raised there. You hold an Australian passport. And if you were in Nicaragua in March of 2020 and you were Australian and you wanted to get back to your home country, you couldn't do it. I follow the bucket travelers. They spent a year and a half in Nicaragua because they were locked out of their country and they were just hunkering down there during those years. So, don't tell me that things can't get dicey and that there might be a reason that you might not feel comfortable or safe in your own country. What if you hold a political belief or some kind of belief system that is against the grain of the national tenor of mindset, right? You're alternative. You don't go, you march to the drum of a different, to the beat of a different drummer. Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. And this doesn't mean that you're some kind of like eco terrorist who is like bombing, I don't even know what. This is like you just hold a different opinion from other people in your country, and you might not be wanted, you might not be respected, you might not be welcome. And let's face it, there are a lot of people in this country that felt that way over the last few years at one point or another, where they didn't really feel particularly welcome in their country. So if you have another residency in another country, that means that you can go to that country and stay there as long as you want. Because for most people, if you're looking at Mexico in particular, you cannot go for more than 180 days on a tourist visa max. And you might even get less. I've heard of people getting less than 180 days when they go into Mexico on a tourist visa. So if you want to be out of your country, say you're from the US or Canada or Australia, or a European country, and you want to be out of your country for more than, 6 months, or in some countries you can be there for a year, like Albania. Americans can be there for a year on a tourist visa, is what I've been told. So, but listen, say you want to be out of your country for an extended period of time and you want to have that as your sort of emergency plan, your exit strategy. Well, a visa comes in handy, and I can stay in Mexico as long as I want. I could go there tomorrow and stay there for the rest of my life, and that would be legal. So this is just, food for thought, something to think about in terms of your planning. If you can get, it's gotten harder to get a Mexican residency in the past few years. The criteria have increased. They go by, one of the ways to get a visa in a residency visa in Mexico is by assets or income. And the bar keeps going higher every year. So it gets harder and harder each year. So if you want to check those numbers online and see what it takes for you to get Mexican residency, I suggest you look into it, because it's not going to get any easier. A lot of countries, they make it tougher to get into their country as time goes on, and more people go there, they can start to restrict it. Then other countries, it may get easier to go to other countries because they're welcoming expats or people from other countries. So it's just something to think about. A second residency is not a bad insurance policy, and it's not going to hurt. It might cost a bit, it might be a little bit of effort and expense, but it may be worth it in the end to have another option that you can call on in times of need. So there's my thoughts, and take it for what it's worth.